Those were the headlines and our key focus. Hamas has now handed over 2 more bodies of hostages who died while in captivity. Meanwhile, Israel has released the 45 remains of Palestinian detainees through the International Committee of the Red Cross under the ceasefire and prisoner exchange deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has stated that it has received the 2 bodies handed over by Hamas in Gaza. Now, the office has stated that the 2 coffins would be escorted into Israel for forensic identification in Tel Aviv. So far, Hamas has transferred 10 bodies of hostages to Israel, and it is yet to release the remaining bodies as well. Meanwhile, Gaza-based health authorities have confirmed the return of the remains of 45 Palestinian detainees. Up till date, Israel has transferred a total of 90 bodies of Palestinian detainees, and the return of the bodies comes after the transfer of the last 20 surviving hostages from Gaza into Israel and the release of about 2,000 Palestinian detainees and prisoners, marking the first phase of this ceasefire deal brokered by the United States of America. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump earlier stated that he would consider allowing Israeli troops to resume military action in Gaza if Hamas refuses to uphold its end of the ceasefire deal. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Peter Baum, foreign editor of Weekly Blitz, joining us from London. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've discussed this earlier as well, and we're now learning that Hamas has released the remains of 2 more bodies. It claims that it requires sophisticated tools in order to unearth the other remains that are lodged in the tunnels or deep underground, and therefore it needs time. In your assessment, will the United States be able to convince Israel to not escalate further? Because we've recently seen statements by Israel's Defense Minister Katz stating that fighting in Gaza will resume if Hamas does not hand over the bodies on time and it continues to violate the ceasefire agreement reached.
Good day, and thank you very much for having me on your show, Pia. I think the United States can exert the necessary pressure on Israel, but whether they will or not is another matter, because it's now clear that Hamas, who agreed to hand over all the bodies without any preconditions, in other words, they would have known if the bodies of the dead hostages were inaccessible or not. And in the view of many analysts now, this is just further lies from the Hamas propaganda machine, and they cannot be trusted. It's clearly an effort to stall for time whilst they regain credibility and seek to retain power in their strongholds. So to answer your question, I think the US can exert pressure, but whether they will or not will really depend on what their thought processes are in whether Hamas are just stalling for time or not, which, as I say, many analysts following the story are believed to be the case. We don't think that Hamas have trouble in locating the bodies. We think they know where the bodies are, and this is just a time stalling effort to ensure that they retain some kind of political power in the process.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and speaking of transition, we've also seen a statement being put out by the Americans that hints at the presence of US troops on ground. They've stated that they would not be directly involved, but they would be overseeing the peace process. This does then pave way for a larger international coalition to come in. We've also seen the Americans hinting at the fact that Egypt and Qatar, the UAE, might also play a really crucial role when it comes to this process.
Yes, indeed. Now, in the area where we've seen international forces such as UNIFIL in Lebanon, they were absolutely hopeless. It was mainly made up of Irish and Spanish troops, I believe, the UNIFIL that made up the international force, and they may as well not have been there. They were an absolute joke. In Gaza, I think probably what will happen is that Egyptian, perhaps Turkish forces will be preeminent, taking up any kind of military role. Whether they're overseen or not by the Americans is another thing. Probably that would be a good idea. But as far as international forces are concerned, from previous experience, as I say, in the region, when we had UNIFIL forces, it was absolutely shambolic. So I think, again, this is only going from feedback from my sources in the area. It will mainly be a combination of Egyptian and Turkish forces, which would be very acceptable to the Palestinians and to the Israelis, probably.
Indeed, sir, I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other crucial updates from the Middle East. Now, Hamas's military wing has stated that the group has fulfilled its commitment to the ceasefire agreement by handing over all living Israeli prisoners in its custody, as well as the bodies of the deceased hostages it could access. Now, after returning 2 more bodies of deceased Israeli hostages, Hamas has stated that recovering the remaining bodies of the deceased Israeli hostages would require extensive efforts and special equipment. Meanwhile, health officials in Gaza are examining the 90 bodies of Palestinian detainees that have been returned by Israel. Officials in Gaza have claimed that the recovered bodies show signs of torture, including possible executions. Meanwhile, several people have been injured as an Israeli drone has struck a car in southern Lebanon. Cross-border warfare between the terror group Hezbollah and Israeli forces, remember, began in October 2023 itself, is escalated into a full-scale war by September 2024, killing more than 4,000 people and injuring 17,000 as well. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Peter Boehm. I'd like to talk about Hezbollah in particular. This is something that we've spoken about earlier as well. But what's really needed at this time in order to contain Hezbollah? Because we know that a majority of its leadership has been wiped out by the Israelis. But there are factions that are still operating near the border. The Lebanese government, do you think now, with the fact that we've seen this peace deal being inked, they're now more receptive to following through with the demands being made by the Americans?
Yeah, there's a great difference now between what was Hezbollah prior to and during the 2-year conflict and what is Hezbollah now. And the difference is that the Lebanese themselves, the Lebanese government under Joseph Aoun, wish to ensure that Hezbollah's military capabilities are totally diluted. They were given a severe blow, as we know, by Israel after October the 7th. They have lost the major support of Syria's Assad, who has fallen, and the new Syrian regime are quite anti-Hezbollah. And also Iran's role as being their master has also taken a severe blow. So whilst Hezbollah seek to ensure that militarily they are still an active player in the region, I think all other parties that want to ensure peace will be and are supporting Israel's occasional foray into Lebanese territory and Syrian territory still controlled by Hezbollah, and I think that will play out in the weeks and months to come. There is no doubt in my mind that every serious player in the region who wants to ensure peace has on its agenda to disarm Hezbollah militarily. Politically, Hezbollah will still be a force in Lebanese politics. Of that, I've no doubt. But militarily, the game now is to completely dilute their capabilities, and I think that's what we're seeing played out at the moment.
Mm-hmm. All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out the time and speaking to us. The Egyptian Electricity Transmission Company has entered into a partnership with UAE-based K&K to advance the Egypt-Europe Electricity Interconnection Project. Now, this agreement will see both sides finalizing studies for the subsea transmission cables linking Egypt to Europe via Italy. The project aims to position Egypt as a key energy hub, facilitating the export of clean energy to Europe while strengthening regional electricity connections. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has emphasized Egypt's commitment to renewable energy and cross-border interconnections, highlighting the importance of this deal for Egypt's global energy role. The Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy, Mahmoud Esmat, has noted that the project's potential to export up to 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy, contributing to global energy transition goals and regional energy security. Shifting focus to more developments, India and Saudi Arabia have held a bilateral meeting to boost ties in the chemicals and petrochemical sector as well. The talks